In this video, you're going to learn 3 questions that you can answer to help you have vision for your worship team this year, to help you know where you're headed, where you want to get to. Coming up. Hey, Spencer here from leadingworshipwell.com. This is the place where we talk about how to lead yourself well, lead your church well, and lead worship well. In this video, we're talking about worship team vision, and by the end of this video, you're going to have a vision for your worship team as you answer these 3 questions, but you need to communicate that to your worship team, and the best time to do that is during your worship rehearsals. And so I want to resource you, first of all, to lead the best worship rehearsal that you can possibly lead. So check out down in the description below a link to the free PDF I put together called the Worship Rehearsal Blueprint. In that blueprint, I'll show you everything that you need to know to have the perfect worship rehearsal that leads your team well. Musically, of course, so they're ready to play songs on Sunday, but more importantly, spiritually and relationally as well. And during that time, you have the opportunity to communicate the vision that we're about to craft to your worship team. So check that out down below, but let's get into it because today we're talking about worship team vision. Do you have a vision for your worship team? And I feel like I always get comments on these videos where people are like, I don't know, it's either about worship team culture or vision. I feel like those are 2 very ambiguous terms, but here's what vision means to me, at least. It means having a goal. Your vision is your goal. We want to know where things are headed because good leaders have a goal. They know where things are headed because you can't lead people if you don't know where you're leading them to. Like, what are you doing if you don't have an end point in mind? That's what we want to have as leaders, and that is referred to colloquially as vision. So I want to make sure that you have a vision for your worship team because you got to be leading them in a direction. So let's discover that direction together, the specific direction for you and your worship team. I'm not going to tell you what it is for your team. I'm going to give you these 3 questions so that you can craft the vision for yourself and lead your team well. So let's get into it. The first thing that we need to do to craft a vision for our worship teams is to answer this question. And you might think I'm about to say something negative. I feel like that's the first thought in my mind, if I'm being honest, when it comes to worship team vision, is to what do you think of? You think of, my team doesn't do this right now, and so they need to do this, so that's my vision for my worship team. They don't show up to rehearsal on time, so my vision for my worship team is that they would finally show up for rehearsal on time, or they don't show up prepared to rehearsal. So my vision for my worship team is that I would have team members who are prepared. We're going to get to that in a second, but I don't want you to start there because that's a very bitter and cynical and negative place to start. It's important to get there eventually, not in a bitter or cynical or negative way, but we do want to get there eventually. Here's the first question I want you to answer, though. We want to frame it in a positive light and enter into this vision casting or vision creation process in a positive attitude. And here is the question. What am I proud of my team right now? What am I proud of my team for right now? And just let's start the process right now. Answer down in the comments below. What makes you proud of your worship team? Think about it. I know it's easy to find the negatives. It's a lot harder to find the positives. So find 1 or 2 positives right now. Just take a moment to think about it. Maybe pause this video, leave a comment down in the comments below. What makes you proud of your worship team? Is it that they faithfully serve every single week? Is it that a specific person on your team has taken on more leadership responsibility and you're proud of them? Is it that you've really sensed this shift in the culture, there's that word again, the worship culture of not just your church, but in particular your team, who is being the catalyst of that change in your church? What is it that makes you proud of your worship team? We want to start there because, first of all, we want to celebrate it and look at how far we've come. But then we want to do this. Whatever makes you proud of your team, lean into that, and part of your goal should be to make sure that they do more of it. because we can elevate our weaknesses and we can play to our strengths, right? This is true in everything in life. You can elevate your weaknesses, which is a lot harder than simply leaning in to your strengths. So if your team is really good at something and they're doing a good job at it, celebrate it, but make the effort to do more of it and encourage them in that. If somebody's stepping up in more leadership in your team, then part of your vision should be, I want to raise them up to be even more of a leader. And maybe right now they're leading like a song like once a month or something. I want them to be leading a song every single time they lead worship, where it's not just me as the worship leader leading every single song, but we've created this team around us that can lead alongside us. Not behind us, not supporting us, but alongside us. So if that's what you're celebrating, make that your goal. Whatever you're celebrating, make it your goal to do more of that. And that's part of your vision for your worship team. Let's move on to question number 2. Okay, question number 2, here's where we get to probably where you thought we were going to start. First, we celebrated. Always good to start there. Now let's talk about this. Here's the question. If I could make one change to my team this year, what would it be? If you could make one change to your worship team this year, what would it be? And this is the improvement part, right? But I want you to notice very carefully how I phrased that question for you. What is one change I can make to my worship team this year? If you sat down, you could probably think of 10, 20, 25 changes maybe that you would make to your worship team if it was up to you. And you'd probably get super specific and you'd be like, this is everything that I want to solve this year. But the thing is, you're probably not going to change everything at once at least, especially in a year. Change, especially if it's like big change, takes time. So be patient, all right? I hope you're not just leading your worship team for 1 year. We're going to be leading our worship teams for 5, 10, 20, 40 years, however long it is. I don't know how long you'll be leading your worship team. But it's not just going to be for the next 3 months or the next year. We're going to have a lot longer than that. So be patient. Take your time. Change takes time. And think about, and I bring that up because I said one change that you want to make to your worship team this year. All right, let's be realistic with our goals. We're going to implement 25 changes at one time and automatically improve our worship ministry to the perfect worship ministry. There's no such thing anyways, but we need to be patient. So set a realistic goal. What's one thing you wish that you could change about your worship team? Get that in mind. Answer that question. One thing, not 50, not 75, not 5, just one thing. And then make that part of your vision for this year. So this is sort of short-term vision planning, which we're going to get into long-term here in a few moments, but that short-term goal. And this is vision, goal setting, sort of the same thing. I think goals are specific vision for your team. And I think a lot of people just get stuck in that general vision where we're like, we would like to have a vibrant worship culture in our church. I think we can do better than that. That doesn't really mean anything whenever you say that. So what's one thing you can change? Make it specific. I could keep listing examples like I've done before. I want them to show up prepared. I want them to memorize their music. I want our team to model worship during our gatherings, whatever it is. One change to your team, and then think about, okay, that's the change that I want to see. What steps need to take place for that to happen? I want my team to model worship, so I'm going to watch Spencer's video about modeling worship for your church as a worship team. And you can learn all about modeling worship there, but basically that would be giving your team time to practice modeling worship, teaching your team how to model worship, showing them video examples of things that you've seen of other people leading worship and saying, this is what worship could look like. So, one change. On to question number 3. Finally, the last question. We've started off celebrating and leaning into our strengths. Number 2, We focused on one thing that we're going to do this year to change our worship team for the better. Now we need to think long term, because good leaders don't just think about what's happening today or this year. They're thinking several years down the road. So I said we wanted to be realistic with our 1-year vision for our team, but you can also accomplish a lot in like 3 years, right? If you buckle down and say, for the next 3 years, I'm going to do something amazing with my team, you can probably accomplish it. And that's why the third question is this: what does my ideal worship team look like 3 years from now? I know it's hard to think out in the future, but what does your ideal worship team look like 3 years from now? Think, I'm filming this video in 2022. Think in 2025, January 2025, where do you want your worship ministry to be? And dream big, right? We've got 3 years to accomplish this, so you can make some amazing changes in that time. What do you want your worship team to look like 3 years from now? Do you want to have more people on your worship team? Do you want to have redundancy in the positions of your team so that if somebody can't serve on a Sunday, somebody else can fill in? Do you want more people to be leading alongside you and leading worship songs, and not just songs, but leading the speaking transitions and the moments in your service? These are all things you can think about and write down. I encourage you to write down your answers to each of these questions. Think about them honestly. Write down your answers and keep it in front of you this year, and that will guide you. And if you feel yourself tempted to go in another direction, there's flexibility in the plan, but it might also remind you, no, this year I am focused to this one change. Or in the next 3 years, I'm focused on these changes. So yes, I could implement this new technology. Yes, I could buy this new piece of gear. Yes, I could do a million things in my worship leading, but my goal for the next 3 years, for the next year, is this thing. So I'm going to dig into that and actually create change in my worship ministry for once. Have a long-term vision for your worship team. Where do you want them to be in the next 3 years? Now, like I said at the beginning of this video, we can't just create this vision and then expect it to magically happen. First of all, we need to put tangible steps in place to make it happen. We kind of thought through that process a little bit. What do I actually need to do to make whatever your goal is happen? But the other really important part is you have to actually communicate it to your worship team. It can't just be in your head and you expect them to catch the vision as they serve in your worship ministry. You can just tell them. Like, it's really that simple. And when do you tell them? One of the best ways to tell them, and you don't just tell them once, you tell them over and over and over again, the best way to communicate your vision for your team over and over and over again is during your worship rehearsals. That should be part of your worship rehearsal time. I call it like the devotional time, where you're focusing on something specific that you want to teach your team. You can incorporate elements of your vision in that devotional time. And so I want you to have the best worship rehearsal time you can possibly have. That's why I put together the worship rehearsal blueprint for you. It's linked down in the description below. In that blueprint, I give you a complete plan, everything that you need to run a perfect worship rehearsal that leads your team well, not just musically, but spiritually and relationally as well. So make sure to check that out down in the description below. Other than that, thanks so much for joining me. Until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.